Everybody, please, you subscribe channel. 'Cause earning videos by week attaches. Thank you.
A glass of milk, paid in full on day. A poor boy who was selling goods from door to door to pay his way through school, found he had only one thin dime left, and he was hungry. He decided he would ask for a meal at the next house. However, he lost his nerve when a lovely young woman opened the door. Instead of a meal, he asked for a drink of water. She thought he looked hungry, so brought him a large glass of milk. He drank it slowly, and then asked, "How much do I owe you?" "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "Mother has taught us never to accept pay for a kindness." He said, "Then I thank you from my heart." As Howard Kelly left that house, he not only felt stronger physically, but his faith in God and man was strong also. He had been ready to give up and quit. Years later, that young woman became critically ill. The local doctors were baffled. They finally sent her to the big city, where they called in specialists to study her rare disease. Dr. Howard Kelly was called in for the consultation. When he heard the name of the town she came from, a strange light filled his eyes. Immediately he rose and went down the hall of the hospital to her room. Dressed in his doctor's gown, he went in to see her. He recognized her at once. He went back to the consultation room determined to do his best to save her life. From that day he gave special attention to the case. After a long struggle, the battle was won. Dr. Kelly requested the business office to pass the final bill to him for approval. He looked at it, then wrote something on the edge, and the bill was sent to her room. She feared to open it, for she was sure it would take the rest of her life to pay for it all. Finally she looked, and something caught her attention on the side of the bill. She began to read the following words, "Paid in full with one glass of milk." Signed, Dr. Howard Kelly. Author unknown, a heart-melt real story. In the image above is Shaila Ghosh, an 83-year-old woman who lives in Pali in West Bengal, a state in the eastern region of India and is the nation's fourth most populous. Her only son had heart ailment and passed away a few months ago. To make ends meet, Shaila now works. Every evening, Shaila comes from Pali to Kolkata to sell chips. When asked if she has a problem in traveling, she weakly smiled and said, "No, the bus gets me here and my health is not that bad." Circumstances could have easily forced her to beg, but her dignity and respect is everything for her. She is determined to work until the end of her life rather than to beg on the streets. Story courtesy of Safia Khatun, a college student in Kolkata. When we go on complaining, let us remember her. She chose to solve her problems on her own, for as they say, God helps them those who help themselves. Don't worry, Shaila is being helped. Although she refuses donations and prefers to make her own living, many people found ways to help without making her feel dependent on anyone, that is, purchase more chips from her. Some are also helping her to build a kiosk. A poor young boy in the joke. A few days ago I landed at the Bombay airport, India, and took a cab to my scheduled destination in South Bombay. I was enjoying the busy traffic with people rushing in every possible directions. Then we got stranded at a very busy intersection. As we waited for the signal to turn green, my eyes met up with a poor young boy, about 12 years old. He removed a piece of bread from his pocket and took a bite. As he was about to take his next bite, a stray dog wagged his tail looking at him. Without hesitation, he sat down and put the bread on the road for the dog to eat. The dog sniffed the bread and walked away. The boy waited until he was sure the dog was gone, then he picked up the bread and ate it. My heart cried and wanted to walk up to the boy, but before I could open the door the signal turned green and our car drove away. I kept thinking about the boy, and later during my evening meal I realized that I was thinking of approaching the boy but never did. I could have stopped the car and walked up to him, which again I never did. All I did was thinking, and this poor little boy who had only one piece of bread without any hesitation sharing it with the dog, though he himself seemed to be very hungry. I learned one of the biggest lessons in my life, which that boy taught me without a conversation. He taught me to share with love and happiness. I am so blessed to have learned this beautiful lesson from my little unknown master. It is my moral duty to share this incident with all my friends across the globe and be blessed with happiness. Thank you, friends, for making this world a beautiful place to dwell. By Dr. Derek Angel Cynthia. A pound of butter. There was a farmer who sold a pound of butter to the baker. One day the baker decided to weigh the butter to see if he was getting a pound, and he found that he was not. This angered him and he took the farmer to court. The judge asked the farmer if he was using any measure. The farmer replied, "Your Honor, I am primitive. I don't have a proper measure, but I do have a scale." The judge asked, "Then how do you weigh the butter?" The farmer replied, "Your Honor, long before the baker started buying butter from me, I have been buying a pound loaf of bread from him. Every day when the baker brings the bread, I put it on the scale and give him the same weight in butter. If anyone is to be blamed, it is the baker." What is the moral of the story? We get back in life what we give to others. Whenever you take an action, ask yourself this question: am I giving fair value for the wages or money I hope to make? Honesty and dishonesty become a habit. Some people practice dishonesty and can lie with a straight face. Others lie so much that they don't even know what the truth is anymore. But who are they deceiving? Themselves. A short story on self-confidence. There was a business executive who was deep in debt and could see no way out. Creditors were closing in on him. Suppliers were demanding payment. He sat on the park bench, head in hands, wondering if anything could save his company from bankruptcy. Suddenly an old man appeared before him. "I can see that something is troubling you," he said. After listening to the executive's woes, the old man said, "I believe I can help you." He asked the man his name, wrote out a check, and pushed it into his hand saying, "Take this money. Meet me here exactly 1 year from today, and you can pay me back at that time." Then he turned and disappeared as quickly as he had come. The business executive saw in his hand a check for $500,000, signed by John D. Rockefeller, then one of the richest men in the world. "I can erase my money worries in an instant," he realized. But instead, the executive decided to put the uncashed check in his safe. Just knowing it was there might give him the strength to work out a way to save his business, he thought. With renewed optimism, he negotiated better deals and extended terms of payment. He closed several big sales. Within a few months, he was out of debt and making money once again. Exactly 1 year later, he returned to the park with the uncashed check. At the agreed-upon time, the old man appeared. But just as the executive was about to hand back the check and share his success story, a nurse came running up and grabbed the old man. "I'm so glad I caught him," she cried. "I hope he hasn't been bothering you. He's always escaping from the rest home and telling people he's John D. Rockefeller." And she led the old man away by the arm. The astonished executive just stood there, stunned. All year long he'd been wheeling and dealing, buying and selling, convinced he had $500,000 behind him. Suddenly, he realized that it wasn't the money, real or imagined, that had turned his life around. It was his newfound self-confidence that gave him the power to achieve anything he went after. A small boy. Yesterday I had stopped at a traffic signal. As I waited for the lights to turn green, a small boy approached me. He was holding a bunch of pens in his hand. He asked me to buy some. I told him I didn't need any. He gave me a beseeching look, explaining that they were very cheap. The boy had a sweet, innocent face and looked tired of trying to sell his pens. I had seen him going to others, but no one bought any of his pens. My friend who was with me suggested to give some money to the boy so he wouldn't bother us, I did give him money by buying 2 of his pens. I explained to my friend that her suggestion would have been a deterrent to the small boy's effort to earn some money instead of begging for help. She agreed and we went on our way. The boy was trying to help his family by doing something. This I thought was commendable. A violin with 3 strings. On November 18, 1995, Itzhak Perlman, a violinist, came on stage to give a concert at Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center in New York City. If you have ever been to a Perlman concert, you know that getting on stage is no small achievement for him. He was stricken with polio as a child, and so he has braces on both legs and walks with the aid of 2 crutches. To see him walk across the stage one step at a time, painfully and slowly, is an awesome sight. He walks painfully, yet majestically, until he reaches his chair. Then he sits down, slowly, puts his crutches on the floor, undoes the clasps on his legs, tucks one foot back and extends the other foot forward. Then he bends down and picks up the violin, puts it under his chin, nods to the conductor and proceeds to play. By now, the audience is used to this ritual. They sit quietly while he makes his way across the stage to his chair. They remain reverently silent while he undoes the clasps on his legs. They wait until he is ready to play. But this time, something went wrong. Just as he finished the first few bars, one of the strings on his violin broke. You could hear it snap. It went off like gunfire across the room. There was no mistaking what that sound meant. There was no mistaking what he had to do. We figured that he would have to get up, put on the clasps again, pick up the crutches and limp his way off stage, to either find another violin or else find another string for this one. But he didn't. Instead, he waited a moment, closed his eyes and then signaled the conductor to begin again. The orchestra began, and he played from where he had left off. And he played with such passion and such power and such purity as they had never heard before. Of course, anyone knows that it is impossible to play a symphonic work with just 3 strings. I know that, and you know that, but that night Itzhak Perlman refused to know that. You could see him modulating, changing, recomposing the piece in his head. At one point, it sounded like he was detuning the strings to get new sounds from them that they had never made before. When he finished, there was an awesome silence in the room. And then people rose and cheered. There was an extraordinary outburst of applause from every corner of the auditorium. We were all on our feet, screaming and cheering, doing everything we could to show how much we appreciated what he had done. He smiled, wiped the sweat from his brow, raised his bow to quiet us, and then he said, not boastfully, but in a quiet, pensive, reverent tone, you know, sometimes it is the artist's task to find out how much music you can still make with what you have left. What a powerful line that is. It has stayed in my mind ever since I heard it. And who knows? Perhaps that is the definition of life, not just for artists but for all of us. Here is a man who has prepared all his life to make music on a violin of 4 strings, who, all of a sudden, in the middle of a concert, finds himself with only 3 strings. So he makes music with 3 strings, and the music he made that night with just 3 strings was more beautiful, more sacred, more memorable, than any that he had ever made before, when he had 4 strings. So, perhaps our task in this shaky, fast-changing, bewildering world in which we live is to make music, at first with all that we have, and then, when that is no longer possible, to make music with what we have left. By Jack Reamer, an office boy jobless man applied for the position of office boy at a very big company. The employer interviewed him, then a test, clean the floor. You are hired. The employer said, give me your email address, and I'll send you the application to fill, as well as when you will start. The man replied, I don't have a computer, neither an email. I'm sorry, said the employer, if you don't have an email that means you do not exist. And who doesn't exist, cannot have the job. The man left with no hope. He didn't know what to do, with only $10 used in his pocket. He then decided to go to the supermarket, bought a 10 kilograms tomato crate, then sold the tomatoes door to door. In less than 2 hours, he succeeded and doubled his capital. He repeated the operation 3 times and returned home with $60 used. The man realized that he could survive by this way, and started to go every day earlier, and returned late. Thus, his money doubled or tripled every day. Shortly later, he bought a cart, then a truck, and then he had his own fleet of delivery vehicles. 5 years later, the man's company was one of the biggest food retailers. He started to plan his family's future, and decided to have a life insurance. He called an insurance broker and chose a protection plan. When the conversation was concluded, the broker asked him his email. The man replied, "I don't have an email." The broker replied curiously, "You don't have an email, and yet have succeeded to build an empire. Do you imagine what you could have done if you had an email?" The man paused for a while, and replied, "An office boy." Author unknown. Single quote. Be discouraged if something is not in your favor today. Better opportunities are waiting ahead.
Everybody, please, you subscribe channel. Cut. Earning videos by week. Attaches. Thank you.